Hi folks, welcome to my 8-Bit Retro Journal. For this video, I'm going to be talking about manuals that you had with your computers and software in the 80s, but I wanted to briefly talk about how this video came about. During the summer, I decided to buy a Obelix comic, this one, because I hadn't had it. I grew up on this stuff, and I tend to buy one every other year or so. I'm not a collector, and I don't need to have them all at once. It's kind of fun to get it in the mail and be able to read through it. Well, this is not what I initially got. What I initially got was this. And I was like, I'd never seen this form factor. I think when I was a kid, I had these small ones that were not full. They were just little snippets of stories. Here from the future, this is actually what I was talking about with regard to these small, so this is what this is in German. I had this as a kid, and these are just small mini stories that weren't full, and they even had smaller ones than this. I forgot about that. So these you got in like Nutella or something that were like even tinier stories. So I thought maybe that's what this was, but this was actually a full 48 pages, and I got this on eBay. The advertiser, it's literally a shrunken version, so it looked full size, and I was surprised, and so I ended up keeping it. But then I bought another one. That's I think the original ones are hardcover, and then they started coming with soft covers, and this is always what I got, and I like them. It's got good artwork and stuff in it, and it's kind of funny. In any case. It just got me to thinking about manuals in the 80s, especially manuals for Sinclair products, and so that's what I'm going to talk about today. So it's gonna, not too much technical going on. So if that doesn't interest you, then click away. But so when I first, think one of the first things I got, I'll try to put this to the side, was a Texas Instruments TI-35 calculator. And what was really cool about that was that it came with a manual. And nowadays, and this manual has a lot of stuff in it. I mean, games, geometry, you could really learn a lot from it. And I remember getting this whole package and really enjoyed this book. And this was in the late 70s. And, my calculator meant something. This is the original calculator that came with it. But then, just to show you some other manuals, I got this calculator on eBay. This is Clive Sinclair's calculator. I got this one, much, much later as an adult on eBay. So obviously the World Wide Web existed. And this is the manual it came with, but this predates this one. This was like probably mid-70s. This was late 70s, early 80s. But this is what it came with. It came with an instruction manual, but then also a program library. And I've shown this once on my channel and gone through and did some of these cool programs. But yeah, this is, it's kind of cool. And it's particularly with the Sinclair ones, it's like they're these miniature sizes. So I wanted to, and then I'll show you one more. I don't know where I got this one, but this is a TI. I have a bunch of these TI-30, 83s, 84s, 86s. I got these probably off a free cycle. And this is the book it came with. Again, I don't know what year this was. 1999 to 2003. So, not as, this is when creating manuals was a little easier, whereas if you look at this one, there's some art to this, So, sort of this era of mid-90s to early 2000s also reminds me a little bit of the Macintosh. When I had the Macintosh 2SI, it came with a manual, and I don't have it anymore, but I have a couple other ones that are around that same era. I've got this one, which is the IBM 365 XD, and 95, 96, and this kind of reminds me of a lot of the Mac manuals were similar to that. And then I also have And this was sort of early 2000s. I have the owner's manual for the Inspiron 8500. I actually have the 8600, so I don't know why I have the manual for the 8500. But again, this is early 2000s, and sort of the same era as this one. And Dell kind of followed this. Now there's a simple explanation as to why manuals existed until the early 2000s, because the World Wide Web was new in 96 onwards, and so manuals slowly started to proliferate online. Let me put these all away here. To where they, now you just don't exist. In fact, if you buy a, if you buy a calculator nowadays, what you get is you get it in sort of the shrink wrap, with maybe instructions on the back, and that's it, and maybe a website that says, go check it out online. And so it's kind of sad, but that's kind of where we've been. Let me put these away. But these are all what I've shown you so far, except for the calculators. I mean, especially this one and this one, these two. The rest of it is not as exciting. These are just basically books that were printed, and many manuals came like this. In fact, this is again 90. So these are like 90s to 2000s. Before that, I do have other examples. Manuals that came for computers or software kind of looked like this, right? So you had a binder with discs, and some of them were bigger. Also have the WordStar one. And yeah, so this is kind of a common form factor for manuals back in the late 70s to 80s for IBM PCs and their software. And it's just kind of, handy to go through, but I mean, we all remember the IBM PC manuals that actually came like this, and they went into a box. Again, not as exciting because it's just a lot of information, but nothing interesting, and not really what I wanted to show today. So if this was the calculator revolution of creating books, and again, this is Texas Instruments, and this is Sir Clive Sinclair's, scientific Cambridge programmable, which takes a 9-volt battery. What was interesting is that when they started creating computers, some manufacturers really had interesting manuals, and one of the first ones that comes to mind for me, at least, is this one. This is my favorite all-time manual. This was my ZX81 programming book, and I don't know if this is the original one, or I have a couple because I bought I bought another ZX81 recently. I think this is what this one came with, and I really learned so much from this. And what was really cool about this, so this is again early 80s, 80, 81, is that it's not just written for users, it's written for programmers. And in fact, in the end here, they even talk about resistors and diagrams. I think there's a schematic in here somewhere where they go into the details. So I know there's one section here where they talk about how they implemented the random number generator, for instance. And so they don't just go into, these are the commands you can type, here's how to load programs, here's how to play games, but they teach you how to use a computer in the beginning, and then they teach you how to write programs, and then they teach you how to go beyond that with some machine code, as well as some of the hardware. And I know somewhere in here is a picture of the circuit board. And yeah, I learned so much from this book. And unfortunately, I didn't grow up with VIC-20s or Commodore 64s. I don't really know what the manuals for those look like. But yeah, this was a terrific manual. Now, I do own a Speccy, but I don't know what the manual for the Speccy looks like. I mean, I know what the cover looks like. It's orange, and they come both in spiral bound and in the ones I've already shown you that have a spine, like like this. They also come in this kind. I think it's about this size. But I don't have a version of it, so I can't tell you what is inside. But I'm gonna assume it's just a continuation of something like this, right? That sort of teaches you how to program and how to use a computer, and maybe talks a little bit about the hardware too. I wish I could find the hardware page, but I didn't plan ahead for this. Now, interestingly enough, the QL, maybe because it was rushed, when I got it about 5 years after the company went out of business, maybe 4 years. The manual was just sheets of paper with 3-hole punches that you were supposed to put in a binder. So I don't know if that's how it actually came with. I think it did. So maybe they thought they needed to be more business-like, so they didn't create a manual like this. And so that's not my favorite, although it was very, the contents of it was amazing. And then, of course, after the company went out of business, I also have the Z88 manual. And this is not my favorite form factor. I don't know why they needed to. If you look, wasting a lot of space here. They could have really made it the same size as this. So I'm not sure. Was this a decision to make it look bigger? Obviously, or maybe it's because they needed to fit in the whole screen in there. That could have been it. Yeah. But I know the QL didn't have a manual like that, so I think that was also pretty interesting. But now let me get to the more interesting part here of my show and tell, really, is what this is today. And that is, aside from the QL's actual manual, which I don't know where I have it. I do have it. It's probably boxed up because I never use it. And again, it was very informative, even though it didn't have sort of this very handy form factor. The contents of it was very informative in terms of the basic and all its applications and again some of the system ones. So, but I'm focusing more on the form factor. When I got my disk interface, I got this. This was the manual that came with the QL Kempston disk interface. And yeah, and this is kind of what got me to thinking about it with the Ostrix book. A lot of the manuals that I got for the QL after, I don't know when this came out actually. Did this come out at the tail end of the QL's existence? Or I guess what I'm wondering is did people start, when they realized the QL wasn't going to continue and they were making sort of third-party software, were they trying to be as low-key as possible, not to spend a ton of money? So I don't know when I thought the Kempston came out in 85, so the QL was still viable. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I have a few others. Obviously with game stuff, this is kind of how the QL software came. And, and this is sort of common. You see this with like Sega cartridges they have. And this is actually kind of a folder. So this doesn't really count because it's not really a manual. However, with the small form factor, though, you had something like this. This is really interesting, I find. So instead of the books like that you had for PCs, on the QL side, you had, this is a plastic box, the actual QL monitor software. Comes in 2 microdrives, but then interestingly enough, this is literally a binder. And in it, you have this tiny but very comprehensive manual. And this is quite unique to the QL, I think, where they got sort of into the small form factor stuff. And I don't know why, but they did. And yeah, this is, and these things tend to be really comprehensive. Somebody actually had to create this. It's like, and then more interesting, and I think this wasn't the only software that came this way. I think something like that. But more interesting than that is the ICE system, a graphical interface. I've shown this in my channel before. They came out in 1985. It only takes up 16K, so it could have literally been internal to the QL if Idersoft had come out with it. And this is the manual that came with it. And I actually had to refer to this recently, and that's what got me to thinking. So it was sort of a culmination of getting the Ostrich book and then looking through this manual to try to find something, and I realized, this is a full-sized, hefty manual that is tiny, and it has all sorts of information in here about. It shows you all the potential icons that ICE has. Gives you the main screen. In fact, when I used to use ICE on a TV and I couldn't see the bottom of it, this is how I knew what was there, because I had the manual. And this was late 80s, early 90s. I think I got this probably in early 90s. And but yeah, this has introduction of what ICE is, what a graphical user interface is. And then gives you some fundamentals of the different commands and what they do. It also gives you, at one point, it gives you a list of icons and what they mean. So you can kind of see all the ones that you have. So there are some that never come up. You can see Abacus, Archive, Easel, Quill, and an export document. And the various ICE commands and what they do. And this was it. So again, one question I have for my readers, if you're, for instance, Atari ST or Amiga, what kind of manuals did yours look like? I think they were probably more in line to the IBM ThinkPad manual. Maybe they were more in line with, maybe this size manual, or what page am I on? Let me use my Kempston to I think, am I right to trying to not destroy anything here. Am I right to assume that the Amiga manuals were more of this type? Or were they spiral bound? So again, I have an Amiga, but it didn't come with any of this stuff. And I don't recall ever seeing too much of what the Amiga came with. I did a video earlier this year where I talked about how the QL came with some built-in software that could do scientific study with. And I did try to research what software did the Amiga come with besides Workbench, and it was really hard to find online resources to that. I guess you had to live then. And own an Amiga 1000 to know what software it came with. Like, ask somebody, did you come with a word processor? And they said that, well, you could get a word processor, so that's not the same as coming with one. But in any case, so back to ICE. And it even talks about the task manager choice, to be able to create a multitasking environment with choice, which I also showed on my channel before. And talks about how to do that. But then it even has some additional programs in here that talk about changing the desktop environment. There's one bonus software, desktop decorator, and then mail merge. I've never seen the mail merge, and kind of an odd thing to include with a graphical user interface that it has a mail merge, right? So. But yeah, so a lot of the QL manuals that I remember getting with software weren't, except for the actual QL manual, were sort of this format. They kind of went with this really small, and makes it handy to keep, many years later. That's why I never threw these away. Whereas all my Mac manuals, I got rid of them. I got rid of my Mac, but I think I got rid of the manual before I got rid of the Mac. And, when you buy these, like when I bought my PowerBook online, it didn't come with a manual because presumably the person that owned the PowerBook got rid of the manual. So, yeah, interesting form factor. So I'm curious if you're watching this, what kind of manuals do your computer come with, whether it was a Commodore 64, an Atari 800, and then, of course, the Atari ST, the Amiga. I know what the Macintosh 128 came with. It came with a very comprehensive manual that introduced people to graphical interfaces. But I haven't seen the Amiga 1000 manual, so that would be very interesting to look at in terms of historically. And again, this ICE from Idersoft was not part of the QL, but certainly gives you a brief introduction of what a graphical interface is. And it's on this very small. It could easily have been a book more, this size, but they chose to make it this size, and it's kind of interesting. All right, so that's just sort of a brief conversation about manuals, which are part of our retro gear, and I just wanted to share that with you. And I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you soon.